You're listening to Himalayan Adventure by Vaile. Chapter 18.
All right, Burnmaster said, moving his chair closer to John. Let's take this from the top. After Burnmaster explained that Nikki was his friend and that she had recently sent him a letter inviting him to join her in Nepal, John began to tell the story of where and when he met Nikki, and this time he left out none of the details. As John described their meeting at Thulo Shabru, a small town about 2 kilometers southeast of Shabrubesi, it occurred to Burnmaster that Nikki had broken 2 of the cardinal rules of climbing. Never go alone and never go with people you don't know and trust. When a climb went wrong, it was sometimes the decisions you made before you set foot on the ice that made the difference between living and dying. The only reason Sam had survived this long was because he had followed both of those cardinal rules. John's tale moved on to the beginning of their trek into Langtang. The trio had passed straight through Shabrubesi on the way in, not needing to stop for any supplies. That explains why nobody in this town has seen Nikki, thought Isabelle. They headed east, said John, following the main trekking trail that took them past a small village called Ganama. There were very few people on the trail, and the handful they did see were traveling in the opposite direction, back towards Shabrubesi. But as the weather was fine and they were making good time, it never occurred to them that setting out on a trek at this time of year was a bad idea. John paused to sip some water, and Burnmaster took the opportunity to ask some questions about Nikki. Why was she trekking into Langtang? Did she say where she was headed? He was tempted to ask if she had talked about the yeti tooth, but he decided he didn't want to raise the issue unnecessarily. The most important thing to do at this stage was to pinpoint her last known location as accurately as possible. John asked if Burnmaster had a map of the area, and he sent Isabelle to go and fetch one from his rucksack. In the meantime, Burnmaster examined John's affected fingers again and noted the pink flush of circulation in the extremities. A blister had formed on the end of one finger, but there would be no lasting damage. These 2 fingers would live another day to do all the important work that fingers do, like pick noses and scratch itchy backsides. Satisfied, he dried and wrapped them together in a thick bandage to keep them warm. Isabelle returned breathlessly with the map and unfolded it on the ground. Everybody crowded around to watch as John traced his newly bandaged fingers along a trail marked with a dotted line, indicating as he did so the places they stopped for the night while Nikki traveled with them. It was a few kilometers past a place called Chamki, said John, that he and Sam parted company with Nikki. As they had only met her a few days before that, there was no emotion in their separation. They wished her well, and she continued on to the east while they turned north, bound for a mountain called Genjleru, and as it turned out, a whole lot of trouble as well. Did she say where she was headed? Asked Burnmaster. The Yala Glacier, I think, John said, but how far she got before the weather went bad, I'm not sure. Burnmaster consulted the map. The Yala Glacier was a kidney-shaped expanse of ice and water whose southern tip touched a 5,000-meter mountain called the Yala Peak. The trek from Chamki to the glacier was over 20 kilometers, some of it through seriously mountainous terrain. There were 2 major peaks along the way, and at this time of year the risk of avalanche was high. He rubbed his hand across the 3-day growth of stubble on his chin pensively. There were more difficult places in the Himalayas to rescue a person from, but not many. If Nikki had made it all the way to the Yala Glacier when the bad weather hit, he would have a devil of a time trying to find her. He quickly did the arithmetic in his head, and based on John's information about the onset of the blizzard, he decided that she might have made it. That meant she could be anywhere in the 20 kilometers between Chamki and the Yala Glacier. His face remained calm as he surveyed the map, but inside he was filled with doubts. Isabelle wasn't burdened with such worries. Awesome, she said. When I first saw how big Langtang National Park is, I wondered how we would cover it all, but now we've narrowed our search down to just this little area. Should be a piece of cake. Right, Tom? Yeah, Burnmaster agreed quietly. A piece of cake. They spoke to John for a little longer about Nikki and how much gear she was carrying. John admitted that he hadn't paid much attention to her rucksack, but as far as he could recall, she had all of the essentials. He added that she looked fit and seemed to know what she was doing. A few minutes later, Burnmaster asked Pemba to arrange a room for John and helped him down the hallway. Then he returned to the group in the foyer who were still crowded around the map, discussing the marked trekking trails that were near the place Nikki was last seen. Isabelle looked up at Burnmaster. So, first thing tomorrow morning we're out of here, right? She asked. You can't wait to go, can you? He remarked. Are you kidding? She replied. Now we know where Nikki is. That's the whole reason we came all this way to Shabrubesi. We can't stop now just because it's going to get a bit more difficult. If we made it through that landslide, we can make it through anything. Actually, we got pulled out of that landslide, remember? Burnmaster said. We didn't really do anything. Isabelle crossed her arms. The point is we survived, she continued, and that took mental toughness, so I know we can handle whatever the Himalayas throws at us. Burnmaster had been wondering if he should let the 14-year-olds come with him. There were a lot of reasons why they should stay there in Shabrubesi, but he could see there would be a mutiny if he suggested it. He looked at each one of them and tried to remember what it was like to be 14 years old. Every new experience was in Technicolor, and missing out on an adventure was the end of the world. He remembered that much. He also remembered that he climbed his first mountain with his father when he was that age. It wasn't a very big mountain, and it wasn't covered in snow and ice, but nevertheless it was a proper mountain, and if he could do it at 14 years old, so could they. Isabelle stared at him imploringly. Okay, you can come, he said. I need your help anyway. The more eyes we have out there looking for Nikki, the better chance we have of finding her. Great, exclaimed Isabelle. They all spent the next 2 hours discussing the upcoming trek and what kind of progress they should aim to make each day. The Koreans were noticeably silent throughout the whole discussion, and Burnmaster wondered how much climbing experience they had, if any. It was yet another reason why he didn't want them to tag along, but he had no way of stopping them. The night wore on, and Laheeti and Twig started to yawn. Burnmaster folded up the map and declared that everybody needed at least a few hours' sleep before tomorrow morning. They all returned to their rooms and turned in for the night. When the hallway was clear, Flattop collected Mohawk and led the way into Maine's room, which became quite crowded with 3 huge GXs standing in it. We need to talk, grunted Flattop. About what? Asked Maine. About what the 2 injured climbers said, replied Flattop. Maine smiled and said, I figured you'd want to thank me for that sooner or later. Flattop looked confused. Thank you for what? He muttered. For making the decision to help them, Maine said. If we didn't, we wouldn't have found out all that information about Zipster. Goes to show that helping strangers is a good thing because you never know when one of them will end up helping you. Spare me the sermon, spat Flattop. You know that helping people ain't my style. It ain't yours either, in case you've forgotten. Hurting people is what we were both trained to do. Speaking of which, I think Burnmaster and his friends have outlived their usefulness and it's time to get rid of them. This comment got Maine's full attention. What? We don't need them anymore, Flattop explained. The 2 climbers told us everything we need to know about the whereabouts of Zipster. Would have been nice to get a more accurate fix on her last location, but not to worry. We can handle it from here without Burnmaster's help. In fact, tagging along with him and the 14-year-olds will just slow us down. So starting now, they're surplus to requirements. Right? Maine searched for a reason why killing Burnmaster and the others would be a tactical error, but his mind went blank. Flattop's logic was cold and inhuman, but it was spoken like a true product of the North Korean military machine. Isabelle, Laheeti, and Twigger would slow the GXs down on the trek into Langtang, and there was no need to piggyback on the 14-year-old's youth and innocence in order to convince strangers to trust them anymore. They probably wouldn't see very many strangers in Langtang, if any. Now that their usefulness had ended, Flattop viewed them as loose ends that needed to be dealt with. Wait a minute, Mohawk said, rubbing a nervous hand over his forehead. If we get rid of Burnmaster, who's going to lead us on the climb to the Yala Glacier? Flattop shrugged and replied, nobody. We'll just work it out as we go. We'll work it out as we go, Mohawk repeated skeptically. Flattop rolled his eyes. Look, if it makes you feel any better, I will lead us, he grumbled. Happy, and how much climbing experience do you have? Queried Mohawk pointedly. Flattop's expression darkened. You know how much climbing experience I have, he retorted. 0, but how hard can it be? I'm faster, stronger, and fitter than Burnmaster, so anything he can do, I can do better. You sure about that? Mohawk shot back. Because I don't want to be stuck halfway up a mountain when you realize that you can't do it better. What? Hissed Flattop. You'd prefer to have a runt-sized, blue-eyed zoologist lead you instead of me. Then the angry set of his mouth twisted into a smug smile and his voice became a tiger's purr. Oh, I know what this is about. You're petrified of heights and now we're gonna climb a mountain, so you think that having Burnmaster along will make it safer. Mohawk squared his shoulders. That's right, he declared. You know I get freaked out just standing on top of a table, so climbing a mountain is a bit outside my comfort zone. Flattop eyeballed his brother angrily. Well, I don't care about your comfort zone, he growled. The smart move is to get rid of Burnmaster and the others and go in search of Zipster ourselves, and I don't care what you think the smart move is, snarled Mohawk. I'm not going up that mountain unless Burnmaster is leading the trip. If you want to go on alone, that's fine, but I'm staying with Burnmaster. You make me sick, said Flat Top. You're putting your own selfish needs ahead of the team and the mission. Have you forgotten everything you learned in North Korea? What kind of soldier are you? Not a very good one, replied Mohawk, feeling an unexpected sense of pride when he realized it was true. Damn right, muttered Flat Top. Disgusted, he turned to Maine, but he knew he wouldn't find any support there. I bet you're on his side, he said accusingly. When Maine nodded wordlessly, Flat Top turned his huge back on his brothers and left the room. Maine glanced at Mohawk. Was all that stuff about not wanting to climb the mountain without Burnmaster really true? He asked. Half true, replied Mohawk. I think we could probably do it ourselves. But I needed to give Flat Top a reason to keep them alive, and Burnmaster's climbing experience seemed like a good one. Maine nodded and said, he looked angry. Think he'll still be here tomorrow? We'll have to wait and see, mused Mohawk. Soon after the GXs went to sleep, Pemba called Zaw and Abby on the satellite phone and, in whispered tones, gave the Yetis a summary of everything that had happened that evening, finishing with a rundown of his companion's plans to set out tomorrow morning. So this Zipster lady is actually in Langtang? Asked Abby. Do you think she's in trouble? Impossible to say, replied Pemba, but apparently she went climbing alone, so if trouble found her there'd be nobody to help her. Abby mulled over this information. Do you think we should let Shangri-La know that there might be a climber lost in Langtang? She asked. Not until we know if she's actually in trouble, replied Pemba. Shangri-La won't appreciate sending some Yetis all the way here only to discover that Zipster is safe and sound in one of the local villages. Abby nodded in agreement and said, I guess. Zaw took the phone from his sister. Did I hear you say that Burnmaster is heading into the mountains tomorrow morning? He asked. Unfortunately, yes, replied Pemba. I thought you were gonna convince them not to go, Zaw muttered. I tried, but their minds are pretty made up about it, explained Pemba. Zaw snorted. Put him on the phone and let me talk to him for a bit. Yeah, that's a great idea, Pemba replied dryly. A Yeti giving Burnmaster a call and telling him not to go into the mountains. I'm sure that will really change his mind. I won't tell him I'm a Yeti, of course, exclaimed Zaw. I'll say I'm, a friendly Langtang park ranger calling to tell him about the dangers of trekking in the Himalayas at this time of year. Abby opened her mouth to ridicule her brother, but then said, Hey, that's actually not a bad idea, but there are no park rangers here, remarked Pemba. You know that and I know that, replied Abby, but maybe Burnmaster and the others don't know that. In the darkness of his hotel room, Pemba shook his head. I dunno, he said slowly. Burnmaster seems to know a fair bit about Langtang. I think it's worth a shot, said Abby. What's the worst that can happen? They're going into the mountains anyway. Maybe this will change their minds. Zaw yawned and laid back on the grassy slope to gaze up at the stars. He and his sister were in a secluded spot about 1 kilometer from Shabrubesi. What does it matter if they all trek into Langtang anyway? He asked. The chances that they'll find a Yeti are 1 in a billion. We've got nothing to worry about. You've sure changed your tune, said Abby. I thought you didn't want to follow a bunch of snot-nosed humans around in the mountains. Isn't that why you've been in a foul mood since the council gave us this mission? What are you talking about? Asked Pemba. He's always in a foul mood. You would be too, scowled Zaw, if you were a member of a superhuman species forced to live in secret in the Himalayas because the rest of the planet can't handle the fact that you're better than they are. Pemba laughed. Is that what you think you are, superhuman? He asked. What else would you call me? Zaw retorted. How about super stupid? Muttered Pemba. Zaw cranked up the necessary degree of indignation. Why don't you crawl out from under the bed covers I'm sure you're hiding under and say that to my face? He scoffed. Bite me, Pemba snapped. Only an idiot would say that to a Yeti with teeth like mine, Zaw said. Abby rolled her eyes and snatched the phone from her brother. Come on, you guys, this is serious, she groaned. The council gave us a job to do, remember, to make sure Burnmaster and his companions have a safe time in Nepal, find absolutely no evidence that Yeti exist, and leave empty-handed. Now that they're heading into the mountains tomorrow morning, our job of keeping them safe is going to be that much harder, so let's start thinking of ways to keep them out of the mountains. Don't worry about their little expedition, Zaw said dismissively. After a few sleepless nights freezing their backsides off in a cold tent, the 14-year-olds will start complaining and pretty soon they'll all turn back. I wouldn't be too sure about that, said Pemba. The 14-year-olds are more gung-ho than Burnmaster to find Nicky Zipster, especially Isabelle. I know what to do, declared Zaw. How about we kidnap one of them? Say, Isabelle. If she's the most gung-ho, then she'd be the best one to grab. They'll be so busy looking for her that they'll forget all about going into the mountains to look for Zipster. Problem solved. We can't kidnap anyone, said Pemba. Why not? Asked Zaw. Because it's against the law, replied Pemba. Last time I checked, laws only apply to humans, Zaw explained helpfully. So that means I can do whatever I want and get away with it. Don't hate me for it. It's one of the few perks of being a member of a secret species of highly intelligent non-humans. Nobody's getting kidnapped, sighed Pemba, and then he was silent for a moment. But you've given me an idea. What if we steal their gear? They won't be able to replace it here in Shabrubesi because the shops don't stock half the equipment they're carrying. They'll be forced to go all the way back to Kathmandu to replace it. Abby was nodding her head in agreement. And it'll take them a while to do that because of the landslide, she said. Right, Pemba replied. They'd be stuck in Shabrubesi without any gear. Wouldn't work if we just stole one person's gear, mused Zaw. We'd have to steal everybody's gear, even from the Koreans who pulled the bus out of the landslide. The thought of sneaking into Flattop's room to steal his rucksack made Pemba's heart skip a beat. True, he said. That makes it a bit more difficult for me, but if I wait till they're all fast asleep, I should be able to— Wait a minute, interrupted Zaw. You're not thinking about doing this yourself, are you? Well, I'm already here, so I'm the obvious choice, right? Stated Pemba. Let's see, replied Zaw with mock seriousness. This is a job that requires stealth, agility, and animal cunning, and you think that you're the obvious choice. How are you going to get into their rooms? Pemba hadn't thought that far ahead. I'll sneak through the doors, and if they're locked, pressed Zaw, I'm pretty sure that somebody will wake up when you start kicking the doors in. All right, I take it you've got a better plan, Pemba snapped. Taking the sat phone from his sister, Zaw proceeded to lay out what he had in mind. The more they discussed it, the riskier it sounded, but Zaw dismissed Pemba's doubts and convinced him to go for it. After they had ironed out a few details, they arranged to rendezvous at the hotel in an hour. Zaw disconnected the call and winked one blue eye at his sister's worried face. Are you sure this is a good idea? Asked Abby. If we get caught. Don't worry, replied Zaw. We're not gonna get caught. We'll be in and out of there before anybody knows it. And then Burnmaster and his friends will be stuck in Shabrubesi just like we want. I kind of like the irony of it, too. Abby frowned and asked, What do you mean? Well, explained Zaw, in Kathmandu we saved Burnmaster from the thieves who tried to steal his gear, and now we're going to steal it ourselves. Weird how things work, don't you think? An uncomfortable thought popped into Abby's head. Doesn't that mean we're thieves? Zaw shrugged. I suppose. Then his face brightened and he said, But Robin Hood was a thief and he was still one of the good guys, right? But Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the poor, protested Abby. Is that what you're planning on doing? Well, actually, Zaw began with a guilty look on his face, I was planning on keeping any goodies I found in the rucksacks for myself. And for you too, of course. Abby gave her brother a direct look. Zaw, all right, he exclaimed. We'll give all of the gear to some poor sod who needs it more than we do. Are you happy now? Very, she replied with a smile. I'm glad one of us is, he grumbled, lying back on the grass, because you just ruined my night.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.